Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. We welcome to all participants to our live Islam study circle from Al-Mawrid UK platform, and we are with our teacher Dr. Khalid Zaheer, and we are going to have three uh, segments in this 60-minute session. First segment will of 15 minutes, and we will try to understand Surah Al-Infal, verse number 17. And then after that, we will have the second segment of 15 minutes, use of intellect in religion. We will continue from the previous discussion. And the third and last segment will be contemporary issue, and we will be discussing about wishing others on their religious occasions. And fourth will be the question answer. I would like to request that you can write your question answer for each segment so we can cover the all questions to be answered by our teacher. Um, if we could not cover, then we uh, can ask in our WhatsApp group as well. Um, and now I would like to request Dr. Khalid Zahi to start the session, sir.
Alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala rasulihil kareem. All praise to Allah, and we praise Him and we thank Him all, and we pray to the Almighty to send His mercy on His noble Prophet. The first segment that I have been asked to do is a continuation of our reading of the Quran, because there is limitation of time and we meet only on a fortnightly basis. What I've done is that I have decided to pick a few verses from different surahs of the Quran. We cover Quranic surahs in the sequence that they are found in the Quran. We have reached Surah Al-Anfal, which is the eighth surah of the Quran, but the third surah in the second group of the Quran. I explained it before, but I don't find any harm in explaining briefly yet again for reminder that the Quran is divided into 7 surah groups, such that each group begins with one or more Meccan surahs and ends with one or more Madan surahs. Each group has its own peculiar, call it central theme, and the different surahs of the group, they proceed logically to achieve the purpose of that theme. The central theme of the second group of surahs, of which Surah Anfal is one of the 4, whose one verse I'm going to talk about after I have introduced this group. In this group, you find that the Almighty is mentioning the fact that the Prophet of Allah, may Allah's mercy be on him, was able to achieve the mandate the Almighty sent him with, which was to ensure that the Almighty's message dominates and his enemies are eliminated, they are annihilated. This group achieves this target, this goal, by presenting first the message to the people of the Arabian Peninsula in general, and the people of Mecca, who were the leaders of the Arabian Peninsula, in particular, the message of the Almighty. So it was an invitation, dawat. The second surah, Surah Al-Araf, is a warning. It warns the people who were being presented with the message of God that if they're not going to accept the message, they, after a certain while, after a deadline will be reached, they will be declared criminals in the eyes of God who did not accept God's message despite it getting absolutely clear to them that it was from God. So they will be declared as criminals and they will be punished and annihilated. This was the warning that was served to them in the second surah of this group, which is the seventh surah of the Quran, Surah Al-Araf. The third surah of this group, which is the eighth surah of the Quran, of which one verse I am going to talk about, Surah Al-Anfal, is the surah of preparation. It is preparing Muslims who were the who were to become the tools of the Almighty's decision to inflict his punishment on the enemies of God's message. God would punish the enemies who would reject the message that he sent through messengers to them by sending one natural calamity or the other. But that was not the only way he had he had decided to punish his enemies. The other way was through the swords, the military might of the companions of his messengers. This second possibility would only come to light, would only get implemented if the number of the companions of messenger of God would be large, as indeed was the case with the last prophet, may Allah's mercy be on him. So this particular surah, Surah Al-Anfal, is preparing believers, Muslims, followers of the last prophet, to be prepared, to become God's tools to implement his punishment. So it prepares them spiritually, it prepares them morally, and it prepares them militarily, urges them to be prepared. And it also does one more thing. It invites the uh, Muslims to be prepared for a war, for a battle. And in the process also talks about the first major battle which Muslims fought against uh, the Quraysh, the people of Mecca. This battle was also a part of the plan that the Almighty had set forth uh, to ultimately inflict his punishment on the rest of the people of the Arabian Peninsula. And that plan was to remove the leadership of Quraysh, who had already been provided with ample opportunity to consider God's message, which was delivered to them most convincingly. So, this surah talks about the Battle of Badr and talks about the fact that in this battle, the Almighty removed the entire leadership of Quraysh so as to provide the ordinary people of the Arabian society who, under the influence and pressures of the leaders of Quraysh, wouldn't have been able to consider God's message with an open mind, without being coerced, pressured. Uh, so it talks about that battle, which was, in a way, also a preparation for the ultimate punishment. And the ultimate punishment is discussed in Surah Tawbah, which is the last surah of this group and the ninth surah of the Quran. I keep repeating that Surah Tawbah is the only surah of the Quran which does not begin with Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim, the customary beginning which we find uh, at the beginning of each surah of the Quran, mentioning the Almighty's attributes of mercy, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Because this Surah Tawbah, is the surah of punishment. Therefore, it was not it was not in line with the message of the surah to talk about God's attribute of mercy when the surah was actually meant to describe the punishment of the enemies of his message. Now, after having described this group and its theme once again, let me now talk about verse 17 that I mentioned. I'm going to uh, I'm going to explain today. This verse is actually clarifying to the believers that the battle of Badr was fought by God's angels, his army. It was a battle which was meant to achieve the purpose of killing the leaders of Quraysh. It's, it was a battle where all leaders were killed and all ordinary Muslims were spared. Sorry, pardon me. All ordinary members of that army of Quraysh, of Mecca, they were spared because it was a special battle which was meant to achieve the purpose that the Almighty had decided to get rid of the people of the leaders of Quraysh. So the verse says, "Falam taqtuluhum," believers. So you did not kill them. You did not kill Abu Jahl. You did not kill Utbah. You could not. You did not kill Shiva, etc. You didn't kill them. وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ قَتَلَهُمْ. Instead, it was God who killed. وَمَا رَمَيْتَ إِذْ رَمَيْتَ. And, O Prophet, you did not throw pebbles at them when you threw pebbles at them. So the Almighty, it is said, asked his prophet messenger to pick a few pebbles in his hand, and he picked them and he threw them towards the troops of the Quraysh, saying Shanat al Wuju, which was meant to be a curse upon those who were fighting against God and his messenger. Uh, and it turned into a storm. So the Almighty is saying, Wama Ramaita is Ramaita. You did not throw pebbles at them, O Prophet, is Ramaita, when you threw them. Walakinna Allah Rama. Instead, it was God who threw them. وَلِيَبْلِيَ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ مِنْهُ بَلَاءً حَسَنًا. Why did it happen? Because the Almighty wanted to inflict his punishment on the enemies, and so that he should provide believers with a test, a trial that would make them succeed. And in Allah Sameen Alim, indeed God is all knowing, is all hearing. So this verse is clarifying that the killing that took place when there was a battle fought between believers and the non-believers was was not actually done by believers. It was God's decision. God is the one who yuhyi wa yumeet, who gives life and gives death. There are certain attributes of the Almighty which are exclusively meant for Him. He can exercise certain decisions that He takes on the basis of His attributes. Nobody else has that right to to implement those decisions. So God kills. He decides about many people every day that they should die. However, if any one of us decides, dares to kill, what we will do is going to be a huge crime. And the Quran clarifies that thou shall not kill. You cannot kill. If you will kill, it would be such a big crime that it would be like you have killed the entire humankind. So, how could God ask people to kill, uh, given that His book clarifies that you cannot kill, and given that God declares that there is no contradiction in His book, in His text? So, He's clarifying that this particular incident, event, when Muslims killed non believers, it was a special occasion when it wasn't that they killed, it was God who killed. God asked them, caused them to kill those people who were the enemies of his message. Uh, the Quran tells us that you cannot kill a human unless that human is a killer, and the law then decides about him that he should also be killed likewise. Or because of the evil designs of the of some criminals, because of their behavior, if the life, the property, or the honor of the common man are at stake because of the negative uh, you know activities of a certain group or a group of, so of a certain individual, then that person can also be killed. Aside from these two possibilities, there is no third reason why an individual should be killed. Therefore, the Almighty had to clarify, and He has clarified in this particular verse most clearly, that in the Battle of Badr, if Muslims killed non Muslims, it was because God wanted them to kill. He, in His Wahi, divine revelation, directly required them to kill. It wasn't that they killed, it was God who killed. His angels came down and implemented His will. That was the first segment of my today's program. The second one, I have to uh, continue with my discussion on the possibility of use of intellect in religion. Uh, Remember, I mentioned in my earlier presentations that there were many Muslims uh, who have presented certain arguments to prove, to show that in Islam it is undesirable, some would say prohibited, to use intellect. They just have to listen to what is being given to them and obey. Uh, I answered those views, the questions that are raised in those views against the use of intellect, and I'd already started discussion on the positive arguments for use of intellect. One of the positive arguments that we find in the Quran in favor of use of intellect is the fact that in many verses of the Quran, you find that the Almighty is answering the questions raised by believers. Uh, the Quran mentions those questions and then goes on to answer those questions. These questions are to be found in Surah Al-Baqarah in verses 215, 217, 219, 220, and 222. They all begin in the same style. يَسْأَلُونَكَ مَاذَا يُنْفِقُونَ, for example. They ask you, uh, how much should they spend? يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ. They ask you about the sacred months. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْخَمْرِ وَالْمَيْسِرِ. They ask you about gambling and alcoholic intoxicating drinks, etc. And to each of these questions, the Almighty gives a response. So obviously, it's an indication of the fact that asking questions is not prohibited, and the Almighty Himself arranged for answering some of the questions that were raised by believers. Another important example, another important passage in the Quran, which enables us to have a feeling that we indeed are encouraged to use our intellect in the Quran, uh, is the story of Adam and the angels. When the Almighty declared before the angels, and it's mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah again, Surah number 2, verses 30 to 33. When God announced His decision to create man, humans, uh, the angels, who we all expect that they are always going to be God's obedient servants, they would always respond to His call without asking questions. They in they instead asked a very serious question. They said, uh, "Atajalu fiha man yufsidu fiha." Are you going to create therein those who are going to create mischief in it? وَيَسْفِكُ الدِّمَاء, and they're going to shed the blood of each other. وَنَحْنُ نُسَبِّحُ بِحَمْدِكَ, even though we are glorifying you, praising you, and declaring you absolutely pure and clean. Uh, why is it then you need to create somebody else whose performance is very likely to be negative? God Almighty did not snub them. He did not say, "How dare you ask this question?" Instead, He said, "Inni alamu ma la ta'lamun." I know what you don't know. And then the Almighty went on to explain to the angels why their uh, their question uh, is not absolutely correct. Why is it that the objection that they've raised is not completely convincing? Um, this response of the Almighty in itself is giving an indication that God wants His intelligent beings, and angels being one of them. He wants them to use their intellect. He doesn't discourage them from asking questions, even if those questions are giving an impression that they are questioning, objecting to the Almighty's decisions. So the Almighty then went on to explain to the angels why they were wrong, why they had not properly understood God's scheme. And when that was explained to the angels were satisfied, and they followed the Almighty's directives, commands wholeheartedly. Obviously, we are God's servants. Even if we don't understand what God is telling us to do, if we are absolutely sure that what He's saying to us is what is coming from Him, we should follow it. However, this story, this incident shows that we have a right to ask, why are we being asked to do something which we don't understand? And the story also shows that if somehow we are able to know the wisdom behind a certain decision, certain expectation, uh, we will do the job more wholeheartedly. I mean, you know, you ask a group of people to join you in a certain project, and you tell them that I'll compensate you for what you're doing for me. You'll get salaries, you'll get perks, etc. Fine. I mean, people will do it for the sake of money, for the sake of perks. But it's going to make a huge difference if you also tell them that, you know what, this is my project and this is the wisdom behind it. That's what it is going to do for you, for others, and that's how it's going to contribute to the society, to the economy, to the overall good of this nation. If people are informed about it and they understand it, it's very likely that their contribution in achieving the project is going to be more wholehearted, more effective. So that's what the Almighty did. Now, I just briefly tell you what the explanation of the Almighty was. If you allow me to paraphrase what the Almighty said, and also fill in the dotted lines that He God has left omitted because they're implied. The full answer of the Almighty was something like this: that He said to the angels that, you know what, your objection is understandable, but where you missed the point was when you did not see the entire picture. You looked at the picture, you looked at my plan only from one angle, and you've missed the other side of it. You've not looked at it from the other side. The other side of the story is this: that you looked at my plan from the point of view that because freedom is going to be provided to these humans, they will misuse this freedom and they will cause mischief on earth and shed the blood of each other. No questions. Absolutely. That's how it's going to be. You got it right. But you did not realize that alongside that possibility, there is going to be another possibility. And that possibility will be that some people, well, hopefully many people, humans, who will be provided with freedom shall use their freedom properly and will become brilliant humans, morally upright, spiritually pure, close to the Almighty, despite the fact that they will have all the opportunities to do wrong, to do evil. And in order to explain this plan of the Almighty, He engaged Adam to introduce some of those humans who were to be high achievers on the positive side, introduce them to the angels. So, ثُمَّ عَرَضَهُمْ عَلَى الْمَلَائِكَةِ, then He presented them before the angels. قَالَ أَنْبِئُونِي بِهَؤُلَاءِ, and He said, let me know their names, their details, their achievements. In kuntum sadiqeen, if you don't, if you really are truthful in your claim that this plan is not very wise. So when the angels came to learn about the fact that on the one hand, if there are going to be uh, pharaohs and Abu Jahals and Abu Lahabs, there are also going to be Musa, Isa, Muhammad alayhi salam, and many other outstanding humans. So they submitted and they understood. In a nutshell, what I'm trying to say is that the Quran, through direct verses, and we'll talk about some of those verses in the next meeting, inshallah, and through its description of stories, of incidents, is clarifying that use of intellect to understand God's religion and to believe in it and to practice it is absolutely essential. If you don't use your intellect, you will not understand God's religion. You will not know its wisdom. You will not be able to be properly convinced and to be inclined towards understanding and following it. That was my second segment. Now let's move on to the third segment. In the third segment, what I do is that I talk about one current contemporary problem which we are faced with. Call it problem, call it challenge, which needs to be addressed. I have talked about a few of them. Let me talk about a subject which is very close to, relevant to the one that I discussed in our last meeting. Remember, in the last meeting, I talked about the fact as to whether uh, Muslims can go to the places of worship of non Muslims. Today, I am going to talk about a similar problem, whether Muslims can greet non Muslims in their religious occasions. Can we say Happy Christmas? Can we say Happy Diwali, etc.? Um, it's not an easy issue. However, uh, our decision is important. The reason is that, on the one hand, we would not like to compromise on our principles, we would not like to compromise on our faith, but on the other hand, we would also not want to uh, sever our ties, our communication with our non Muslim brothers and sisters. We don't want to behave in a manner that we are isolated. Um, and because it's a difficult subject, um, let's let's face it. Let's admit that there could be more than one answers. And if there is somebody who has answered this question any differently from you, what your understanding is, just respect that understanding. By respecting somebody else's understanding, I don't mean that we cannot criticize it. But even if we criticize it, we should not ridicule it. We should just point out the fact that, you know, the weakness that we observe in the other understanding is such and such. My view on this difficult subject is that I think that when we are living with non-Muslims, uh, there is no harm in saying Happy Christmas, Happy Diwali, or anything else. Uh, the reason is that we are actually not condoning, confirming uh, the religious attitude of the people that whom we are congratulating. It's only that we are wishing them well and being good neighbors, trying to establish and reaffirm our relationship with each other in a positive way, giving them back what they had given us. They wished us happy Eid. We are wishing them happy Christmas. They said uh, happy Ramadan. We said good to you in Diwali. Uh, the very fact that we are living with them and interacting with them positively with good manners is can be problematic for some people, some Muslims, who may say that why are you behaving positively with somebody who does not believe in your prophet, who does not accept Islam as God's message? Well, honestly, as far as the answer is concerned, whether to this question or the question as to why we are wishing somebody on their religious festivities, religious occasions, is that we are not confirming their views. We are simply being good fellow citizens. We are trying to uh, continue with our process of communication. We are not putting them off. We are not shutting down our communication process. It's a way of living together with others uh, in a manner where the environment is congenial for discussion, and we can find occasions when we can put across our point of view to the others. However, in doing all that I am talking about, we are not supposed to compromise on our principles. We will not participate in any activity, ritual, which they are undertaking religiously, which if somebody becomes a part of, creates an impression that he belongs to that religious denomination, that religious group. So it's just wishing people good luck, a good day, a good experience is what we are supposed to do. And we must never ever forget the fact that the message that we have with us is the last message of God, which is meant in God's plan for everyone. Everybody must come to learn about it and hopefully accept it. Qul, O Prophet, say, Ya Yuhannas, O people, Inni Rasulullahi ilaykum. I am God's messenger for you, the message of which is meant for you. Jamian, all of you. So, without any exceptions, we will not make an aggressive attempt to convert them, but deep down in our heart, we would like to convert them. As indeed, we would allow them to convert us. We want this world, we want the discussion to be open. We claim that our message is the truth, and we would allow others to get the opportunity to consider our claim with an open mind. How can we create an environment where this claim of ours is tested, is checked with with an open mind, uh, unless there is a dialogue, there is a discussion. No genuine discussion can take place between two individuals or group of people if there is tension. When we stay away from wishing others in their religious festivities, we're actually backing out. We're actually uh, giving the other person the understanding that the connection, the communication between us and you is is almost negligible, non-existent. Uh, do we lose our faith when we say all these things that we are wishing them? Uh, no, we don't. I mean, we just saying them good luck. I mean, is it not that every day when you meet, living in a country where there are many non-Muslims, good morning, good evening. I mean, if somebody is to become absolutely rigid and stubborn, one might ask, why are you wishing somebody well who you know is not as yet has accepted your message? Why would you do it? Well, the reason is that, let's face it, uh, when you wish somebody well, you are not in the process condoning, confirming his religious beliefs. Likewise, when you are wishing somebody well in his religious on his religious occasions, uh, when he's celebrating some part of his uh, religious belief, you are not saying that you know what your belief is, that it's absolutely brilliant. You're not saying that. If you will say that, then obviously you will be compromising on your principles. But if you will be simply merely wishing well, you will not be doing anything wrong. In fact, if your intention would be that let's maintain good relations with these people and let's find time, opportunity to talk to them about our faith. I think that should be in the heart of every believing Muslim, that he or she wants to interact with others with a view to enabling those others to also come close to the message of the Almighty. And that, as I said, cannot be possible unless our relationship with them is good, is healthy, is positive, and that is not possible unless we wish others uh, in their on their occasions of religious celebrations. Somebody who doesn't want to do it, well, I don't have anything to say against him or her. But those who are doing it for a good reason and they have already mentioned their intentions and are clarifying that they are not compromising on their faith, nobody has a right to say that what you're doing is going to deprive you of your faith. So, let's agree to disagree and let's try to understand each other's point of view, as indeed we would want those non-Muslims to understand our point of view. And for that purpose, it's important that we also understand their point of view. For that purpose, it's important that we have a good channel of communication open uh, between us. So that was my third segment. Now I am here available for the fourth segment of questions and answers.
Jazakallah, Dr. Sahib. And uh, you all, I want to let the all participants to know your mics are self-muted mode, so you can unmute your mic and start to speak. But if any mic is creating a distortion, so I will have to mute it, unfortunately. Uh, Dr. Sab,
Can I?
one of our, yeah, the sister Rafia has a question. Yeah.
Okay. Assalamualaikum, can you hear me?
Walaikum assalam. Yes, I can.
Dr. Khalid, I just heard your talk about greeting non-Muslims. My question is, if I say Merry Christmas or Happy Christmas to a Christian, I of course don't understand how can I compromise my faith. Like the Christian says Eid Mubarak to me, I also don't think that they are compromising their faith. The second is that I understand Islam is the final religion. Since Islam means submission to God and seeking the truth, hasn't Islam always been the only deen that all prophets followed? This
Okay,
is
as far as
one.
the first question is concerned, I agree with you. That's what I've been saying. I said that when we say Happy Christmas to a Christian at the time of Christmas, we're not compromising on our faith. And when they say Eid Mubarak to us at the time of, on the occasion of Eid, they are not saying that we have become Muslims. So I think it's to me, it's not really a very good thing to say that wishing another person belonging to another religion on his religious occasions would make you belong to that religion. As far as the second question is concerned, most certainly, if a person is believing in and practicing the faith that he or she sincerely thinks believes is from God and is doing it uh, with an open mind. Could you kindly mute somebody is creating a noise that you then that person is actually following Islam. Islam, which is submission. However, because we believe that this message of Islam that was sent by the Almighty through His messengers from time to time came to this world for the last time in its pristine, pure form. All prophets brought Islam in its pure form, but it got altered, contaminated, because humans are free. And the Almighty, the freedom that He provided to humans, caused the message to get altered. So He revealed His message in its final version through Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And this message is now fully preserved. Now, we Muslims who have been given the responsibility to be Muslims, we should share this piece of information with the rest of humanity, some of who are already practicing their faith, the faith that they were introduced to. We will not fight with them, we will not accuse them, but we will politely, wisely, intelligently introduce God's final message to them. If they are able to understand it and they follow it, brilliant. If not, well, it's between them and God.
Right. A brother who is a participant today as well, Brother Talat, he has written a question in our question answer window. Dr. Saab, can you read or shall I read it for you?
Let me see if I can read it. Where should I be able to read it from? Webcam. Kindly read it out for me. I can't.
Yeah. Brother Talat is saying, Salam, Dr. Saab, you talk about use of intellect to ask questions. A young man asked my son a question about existence and reality of God and his Prophet ﷺ, as our intellect say, we should not believe until we confirm it with our senses. How would you confirm there is a God and he gave a book to a Prophet Muhammad and there is a hell and there is a heaven? How you would confirm?
I think we ask the young man to be a part of this group and to continue to participate in our discussions. Uh, from the from well, if not next, the one after the next session, I will start talking about belief in God, then belief in the life hereafter, belief in prophets. And in each of these discussions, you will see that God Almighty is providing its the readers of the Quran with arguments after arguments to appreciate and know that God exists, that that Prophet Muhammad, may God's mercy be on him, is indeed God's messenger, and that the life hereafter is most certainly uh, a reality. So it's a long debate, but if you want me to give you a very brief flavor of each one of them, uh, as far as belief in God is concerned, the Almighty tells us, quite apart from the fact that we know God intuitively, we know God through history of certain experiences that our ancestors had. We can also appreciate God intellectually by observing the world around us uh, and noticing that there is discipline in this world, that this world is providing for our needs, that this world is brilliant, and yet we did not do anything for it. And the manner this world is operating, there seems to be wisdom. There is a plan which is getting implemented. How can we explain all this unless we admit that there is a mighty God who is causing discipline to take place? That there is a provider who is providing for our needs, that there is a merciful God who caused us to get this brilliant life which we all love, and there is a wise God who has, through his wisdom, caused this world to get created and to function. The Quran tells us that Prophet Muhammad, God's mercy be on him, is his messenger, and in order to prove that point, the Quran has given four categories of arguments. The argument of the Prophet's character, the argument of the Quranic text's brilliance, the argument of the fact that the earlier books predicted, that prophesied that the last prophet would come, And the argument that the Prophet during his lifetime made a prediction, prophesied something which, when he prophesied, looked very, very unlikely, and yet it happened during his lifetime. The Quran clarifies that regarding the life hereafter, it doesn't make sense that there is a life that we are leading, but there should not be another life. The life hereafter is a necessary requirement of this life to come together to become a pair. Otherwise, this life would not make sense. And the Quran explains it. The Quran also explains that the life hereafter is possible and gives arguments for it. The Quran explains that if you believe in God, you have to believe in life hereafter. Tell this young man that all these arguments are mentioned in the Quran, but the Quran also states one thing more, and that is that despite all these arguments, nobody shall believe unless the individual is really, genuinely interested in knowing the truth. But obviously, it's a long debate. I cannot go any further from that.
Yeah,
Can I ask one more
and
question,
there,
please?
yeah, Sister Asya,
If,
just hold on. We are just completing this question, please.
okay,
I'll come
okay.
back to you. Thank you.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Sam, no problem. The question is also saying, is there any hell or heaven? So, is that also including your answer, right?
Oh, yes. You see, hell and heaven are a necessary part of the life hereafter. If you accept the possibility of another life, which the Quran is presenting, then the possibility of that life resulting in the ultimate outcome of failure and of success is a part of it. So we'll talk all about it.
Right. No problem. I hope that Brother Khalid, you got the answer. If you need more clarification and in detail, you very happy to send a message on a WhatsApp group or contact our teacher directly as well. No problem. Yeah, Sister Rasia, you can ask the question, please.
Um, Dr. Khalid, we believe Quran as the final book of authority, but does not the Quran also refer the Jews to get all the ahkamat from the Torah and the Christian from the Injil? Can you please explain this to me? Thank you.
You see, when you read Surah Al-Ma'idah, which is the fifth chapter of the Quran, and you read the fact that the Almighty is, for example, asking some Jews to take Torah seriously because it's God's book, what it is doing is that it is telling the Jews to follow what they declare. They declare themselves to be Jews. Then why are they not following Torah? Because Torah is also God's book. The Quran's claim is that if there is a good Jew or if there is a good Nasrani, I wouldn't say Christians, but I would say Nasrani, which, well, in the present times are the Christians. Uh, if they are following their religion properly and sincerely, and they are presented with God's last message, which is nothing but a continuation of the earlier message, which is the final edition of God's message. If there's a good Jew or a good Nasrani Christian, and he is introduced with the message of God properly, intelligently, he will accept it. Why would he not accept it? Because he would know that this message that I have been following is from God, but I know from this message that another message wants to come, and that message has already come. So I have no problems. It's like, there is a Muslim who is saying his prayers, is giving zakat, and all of a sudden he comes to realize that the month of Ramadan has come, which is again mentioned in the book. So why would he not fast? So, for a good believer in Moses and Jesus alayhi salam, believing in Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would be a natural consequence. However, I am not accusing the Jews and the Christians of the modern times, the present times, of doing what is wrong or behaving in a completely unacceptable manner. Because I believe that we Muslims are not doing enough to deliver the message to them. Some of them might actually have received the message. I don't dispute that. But obviously, the message, the way it's being delivered now, is not qualitatively the same as it was delivered by the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him. So, whether they are morally obliged to accept this message or not, only God can decide.
Yes, thank you. Dr. Saab, my one of question is related to first segment from the Quran for Surah Al-Infal. My question is why there is a different approach from different prophet in the history. Like we see our Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, uh, he engaged his people in waging the war or defending against kuffar in form of war. Uh, Whereas, and many times, but other prophets like Prophet Jesus, may Allah be pleased with him, Prophet Noah, or other, they never ask their people to take the weapons and fight against non-believers or stuff. So there is a approach definitely, and because of this fact, the modern mind or people in the West or who do not have a good feelings about Islam, they take this thing as their solid point that your prophet took the weapon. Why he did not do tazkiyah of the kafir, uh, or like other prophet did, like Prophet Jesus did, many other, because prophets meant to convey the message, not implementing the message. Like so, something like an a significant portion of Quran is telling us about war or on that time, and we did actually. So sometimes it's difficult to defend our position in terms of stability of peace in the world is concerned. How you would respond?
For one thing, Maratib Saab, had you been living in Pakistan for all throughout your life, I'm sure you wouldn't have asked this question. So let us celebrate the fact that God has arranged for you people to be living in non-Muslim, in countries, in societies where the predominant population is non-Muslim. So your your faith, your teachings of your religion are being challenged, which is good, which would cause you to think hard, and to investigate. Uh, you see, I think what we need to do is to not debate with them unnecessarily, because quite often I've seen that debates they transform uh, into an emotionally charged exchange of accusations, and people don't listen to each other when they are debating. Well, you can debate intelligently, but I think it's better to arrange for a discussion where you are putting across your point of view and you're listening to the other point of view with an open mind. Uh, you tell them that God's principle, Sunnah, is one, which is if a messenger of God would come to deliver his message, and if he gets the opportunity of of experiencing the full length of his prophetic mission, then what happened in the case of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam would have happened in the case of each and every messenger. But the fact of the matter is that what happened in the case of Prophet Muhammad is what did not happen in the case of many other messengers, except with the possible exception of Musa alayhi salam. These two prophets, therefore, are declared, are mentioned as similar to each other. In Surah Al-Muzammil, Surah 73, the Almighty is mentioning, verse 15, the similarity between Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Musa alayhi salam. Inna arsalna ilaykum rasulan. We have sent towards you a messenger, the Almighty mentioning it to the people of Mecca. Shahidan alaykum, making him a representative who is a witness over you. Kama arsalna ila Fir'auna rasula. The same way as we sent a messenger towards Pharaoh, that is Musa alayhi salam. If all messengers would have had the same responses as these two messengers got, they would have also had the same length of their mission in similar ways. But what happened was that in the case of most of the other messengers that we know of, there were very few people who believed in them. If you look at the Quran and the Bible, it seems that the number of people who followed Lut alayhi salam, Lot, were not in double figures. So it was not possible for many of these messengers to engage in a battle against the enemies for the Almighty's punishment, wrath, to be implemented on them. So it was God's natural calamities which did the job. In the case of Musa alayhi salam and in the case of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in particular, there was a far greater number, large number of people who believed in him, and therefore the end result was that instead of the natural calamities, it were the believers who were asked to do the task. So all messengers, they followed the same pattern: dawat, invitation; warning, inzar; migration, hijrat; and punishment. But the punishment in the case of those who had a very small following, very few people following them, the punishment was in the form of natural calamities. And in the case of those very few messengers who had a larger number of people following them, the punishment was inflicted in the form of the military might getting inflicted upon the enemies. Now, tell them that this is what the Quran itself is explaining. The Quran is actually stating that, as I said in the verse that we read out today, we discussed today, that the killings that took place were not done by Muslims. It was God who did it. He caused the swords of the companions to be used for his project. He directly addressed them through his messenger and asked them to do it. The sad state of affairs is that this reality has not been appreciated by a large number of Muslims who have interpreted these verses to mean to give a message that would be generally, universally applicable, which is what really has caused so many problems. And I think probably we should also explain it to the non-Muslims as much as we should, and even more, we should explain to the Muslims that this message that talks about killing non-Muslims and fighting against them has got nothing at all to do with them, to do with us, with people who are living in later time. That's a big challenge. As I said earlier, I do still have those, I think, clips somewhere in the internet, probably in my YouTube channel or wherever, wherein in my trip to Australia, this was exactly the subject that I talked about to clarify that terrorism that has been unleashed in the name of Islam has got nothing to do with Islam. And obviously, we should continue to answer the queries of the non-Muslims by explaining from the text that please understand the text. What Muslims say and do is not necessarily Islam. What the Quran says is what Islam is.
Right, Jazakallah. Jazakallah. A- anyone has a question before we closing this session, please? You all are on self-mute mode, and you need to
Assalamualaikum, Dr.
unmute
Sab.
your mic.
I'll ask a question if you've got time.
Yes, Raza.
When you were in your second segment, you were quoting a verse from Quran where the angels, where God is talking to the angels and He's saying to them that I'm going to appoint a Khalifa on earth. And when angels respond to God in a question, they describe what is like the character of well, maybe character or maybe nature of this new creation, that it causes bloodshed and corruption on earth. But they don't just say that, they say that in contrast with what they do, which is they say that we do hamd and we do takaddus, or we sanctify you. So why are they making a comparison with themselves? Are
Right.
they, is this some sort of a competitive statement in which they are saying, well, we do this, don't we deserve something like this, or shouldn't we be the one rather than this new creation which is prone to such low acts? And
Right.
when God, I'll just continue and you could respond. And after that, in the next verse, after teaching Adam the names, God says to the angels, "You tell me what they are." And He says, "In kuntum sadikun, if you are truthful." I mean, what else are the angels going to be except being truthful? And these words, "In kuntum sadikun," is used like throughout the Quran. You see this in many places when God challenges somebody. He says, "In kuntum sadikun, if you are true." And I'm just wondering
Right.
why are those words used?
Uh, let me uh, mention your first question for the benefit of those who can't hear you properly. The first question is that why did the angels, while questioning behind the wisdom behind God Almighty's decision to create man, and while mentioning the fact that man is going to cause mischief on earth and is going to shed the blood of each other, they didn't say only that. They also went on to say that, on the other hand, we glorify you, we do your tasbih, we praise you, and we declare you pure. نقدس لك. Why did they say that? Uh, is it that they were presenting themselves as competitors of humans and wanted them to enjoy that status? I think it was something similar to what you were suggesting. I think what they were saying was that, oh Almighty, uh, what was the need for you to create a new being when we are already doing what you want from your creatures? I mean, after all, is it not that you want to be praised, you want to be glorified, you want to be declared pure by your creatures, by your servants, and that is exactly what we are doing. So we're not we're not completely convinced that there was any need for somebody new to be created for for filling a void. Where is that void? I mean, we are doing everything. Uh, and it seems that the Almighty responded to them by saying that, you know what, angels, you're right that you are praising me and you are glorifying me and everything. But let's face it, you don't have a choice. You know, you're right in front of me. You see me. You talk to me. So you do all this, yes, willingly. But even if you were not willing, reluctant, you would still have done. I am now creating someone who will have complete freedom, who will not be in my presence. I will be hidden from them. And then I'll see what they do. So this is different. And then God, now the second question which Raza asked was, uh, why did God say that uh, give names of these if you're really truthful? Why did God say that if you're really truthful? In kuntum sadiqeen. My understanding is that the reason why I said it that way was that he was asking them to give the names and details of these humans that he was about to create, uh, to tell them that they don't know who these people would be and what their achievements would be. Though you don't know, you don't even know that these will be the people who will live in a world where they'll be absolutely, completely free in a certain domain of their lives. And yet they are going to be as submissive as you are. Do you know that? If you are really truthful in your claim that there was no need for another creation, if you're really true, if you're really sadiq in your claim that there was no need for another creation, then tell us, do you know them? So they didn't know them. So that's why the Almighty used that expression. I hope it explains.
May I ask another question, please?
Yeah, yes, sister. Please go ahead.
Uh, Dr. Saab, I just wanted to ask you about something very basic, which was that if you could recommend either any readings of Prophet's uh, daily life, the simple daily life of how he actually existed and the choices he made. For example, we know that obviously Arabia was in a particular state. He had a simple room in the masjid. Everything was being made from scratch, so everything was simple. But is there any evidence that that simplicity didn't just happen without choice? That they had a choice, but they opted for simple way of living? Because a lot of people say that austerity or all of these things and how he lived with his wife and the simple stories. Where can I get those? How he ate, the choices he made, the house he lived in, the use of water. He showered, and there is a little mention of with Hazrat Aisha as well, that they shared a little bucket of water. Those little details which gives us a deeper understanding of that. One, of the simple aspects of life, and two, with the environment. Where can we get all those little details as first evidence?
Sister, I might disappoint you by saying that I would not strongly recommend uh, what you are asking for to read, even though it's available. I mean, all these books of Hadith, Bukhari, Muslim, etc., they give you lots of details. And if you would ask me, I will also provide you with the names of the books which specifically talk about this topic. But the reason why I am a bit reluctant about it is that this is history collected and compiled by humans. We're not very sure that they were absolutely 100% accurate in the description. And also the fact that this description is actually the narration of how things happen without an accompanying explanation as to why they happen. And they have a very strong potential of replacing the Quran as the basic inspiration source of learning religion. That is what has happened in the learning of Islam. You know, people, and obviously it's very fascinating to know how the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, lived. We unwittingly, when we read these books, we somehow start imagining that this is exactly the picture that how it was. And uh, when you imagine that picture, which is written in text, that's how the Prophet lived, and you would say that that's about it. We've got everything. That's the ultimate source. Even though that source was never arranged by the Prophet himself to be transmitted, there were people who have given us this information. We are very thankful to them. It's important, but it must always be taken as the footnote of the Quran. I'll just give you an example to explain to you why I'm giving you this confusing response. The Almighty mentions in the Quran that good humans, good believers, are to lead a life of moderation, avoiding both extremes. They should neither be spending prodigally or excessively, nor they should be niggardly, nor they should be uh, completely on the other extreme. They should follow a midway path. That's the principle of the Quran. You read the Prophet, may Allah's mercy be on him, his example, you find that he was extremely simple. He was living a life wherein sometimes there would come days when he would hardly have any meals, etc. And, you know, without the guidance of the Quran, you would be led to believe that probably this is the ideal life, without knowing that the circumstances in which he was living, that was the moderate life that could be led because of the circumstances, because of the situation, because of the fact that there were so many poor people around him whom he had to lead, etc. Uh, and obviously, the very fact that I can't, offhand give you one name of the text in itself is a proof that this particular piece of information, although it's important, has not been properly arranged because it doesn't enjoy the same status. Having said all that, uh, probably one of the texts that I would recommend is the one which was written by Khalid Masood, Khalid Masood Saab. His book in Urdu is Hayate Rasool Ummi. I think that's what the title is. And it's now being translated. I guess probably a good part of it has already been translated into English as well. I recommend this book, not that it's the only one, because of the fact that this book has been written with the same principle in mind, that the life of the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, is very important. But it's even more important that his life should be read in the light of the Quran.
Actually, I completely understand where you're coming from, and I defer to the statements you've made. But something as simple as, I mean, Hudur Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam was there at a time where there were a lot of poor people. But the point is, in the population today, we still have a huge number of poor people still, and we have obscene amounts of, the rich, the extreme rich who own half the world as well. So we are still conflicted as to what our own average is. And something as simple as building mosques. Now, building a mosque when such a huge population still doesn't eat 3 times, they do not have clean water, they do not have toilets, and embellishing and decorating mosque and spending so much money and not realizing that we are setting the wrong precedents. Yes, we want to be average, we want to beautify, but the difference between beautification and managing that money and taking care of our populations first, how do we deal with those things? I know average house, okay, we can talk about average house, but for a nation to create Gwadar, let's say the new task force is trying to think of Gwadar as the new Dubai, when majority of Pakistan still doesn't have access to the basic rights. Now, how do we blend those two, and how can we create that vision for the public as potential leaders, that we have to think differently based on Quran and Sunnah, of course. Um, so, this is where I'm conflicted, that nobody is presenting that vision, and we want to be like a developed country, and yet we still haven't taken care of all these other issues of basic human rights.
I think that's a very valid point, and I think there's nothing wrong. In fact, it's going to be a commendable effort, and the manner that you've put in now is absolutely fine. You first and foremost mention the Quran and its relevant verses, and then go on to give the example of the Prophet, may God's mercy be on him, as an explanation of the Quran, and emphasize the fact that that's what the Almighty's word says, and that's what the messenger who brought the message, he did in his lifetime. So let's also follow the midway, the moderate path. I think that's the kind of message that we should put across. And not just few examples that are written in the books of history, which would cause us to actually present an extreme view, which the danger is that if people would come to learn about it, they will ignore it because, you know, God's message is what has an impact, and God's message is what is natural, what strikes at the very balanced approach that needs to be followed. So that would be brilliant. Please go ahead and let me know how I can be of any support.
Amazing,
Islam, Dr. Sab, I'd
amazing.
like to add a point here. She was earlier asking about more of a kind of Sira book. I mean, I know that we have certain reservations, but Sister Kokab has recently published a book, and I believe the name of the book is Paigambare Insaniyat ke Ikhlaq Adat. And I understand that she had been working on the Mishkat Masabi collection of hadith, and then she has done some kind of sorting and sifting of that book, and her and Shahzad Salim have compiled this book together, where it talks about different aspects of his life. So I would just like to plug that book in, and we've got a couple of copies available in UK. uh, if the sister is interested, we can send one to her.
Great, great, excellent. The job is done.
Yeah, and Sister Huma, the Sister Kokab is our Al-Mawrid associate. She's our researcher. So you can find her profile on our Al-Mawrid website as well. And of course, Brother Raza is mentioning her books. So you can find on the website as well easily. Jazakallah khair. We always running out the time because question answer takes too long session actually. So we already have passed around 20-25 minutes. We are grateful to our teacher, Dr. Khalid Zaheer, and all participants. And if any question we have not taken, please accept our apology. You have a platform of WhatsApp group dedicated for Dr. Khalid Zaheer's class. I have mentioned the URL. You can join directly. And if you have any questions, you can ask there as well. So thank you very much, Jazakallah. We'll see all guys in the next session, inshallah, after 2 weeks with Dr. Khalid Hussain. Many thanks.
Thank
Jazakallah
you.
khair.
Jazakallah. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa
Walaikum
barakatuh.
assalam.
Alaikum assalam.